Hey guys, welcome to another edition of the Monday Morning Tennis Rant. The Australian Open just started. We had some great first round matches, and in today's video, I want to talk about two. Now let me start with Djokovic against Djokovic Jr. Basavareddy. This guy has strokes that look very similar to Novak, which led me to do some research on his strokes. And it is so difficult in the game of tennis to find two players with the same strokes. The two guys that come the closest are Roger Federer and Grigor Dimitrov. And even there, you're going to find some differences on the forehand, the backhand, and the serve. When you look at Basavareddy, you do see some Djokovic in him. The stroke that's most similar between Basavareddy and Djokovic is the two-handed backhand. Basavareddy has an excellent two-handed backhand. However, the forehand and the serve have some similarity, but they are quite different. Obviously on the serve, Basavareddy serves with a pinpoint stance. His lag is more prolonged than Djokovic's, but the one similarity is that Basavareddy bends his wrist on the bottom portion of the lag, just like Djokovic does. And on the forehand, Basavareddy has a little bit more of a next-gen forehand compared to Djokovic. However, like I said, the backhand does look very similar. And even the game style, I wouldn't necessarily compare Basavareddy to Djokovic. I see Basavareddy a little bit more like someone who uses the opponent's pace, like a counter puncher. Of course, Basavareddy can play aggressive too. He serves well, can play with a lot of power. But I don't see him being as versatile as Novak, where Novak can play the counter puncher style, but Novak can also blow players off the court. And Basavareddy is a huge fan of Novak. He has a picture of Novak on his WhatsApp profile. I think Basavareddy can have a great career. He's a phenomenal player. And the fact that he outplayed Novak in the first set and a half on center court at the Australian Open tells you a lot about the quality of the player. Another super interesting thing in this match was the fact that Basavareddy was cramping late in that second set, and he recovered from the cramps. I thought that he was going to be done, he's going to get blown off the court, but no, he actually recovered from the cramps and was able to play his normal level in the third and the fourth set. So super exciting young player, another American potentially in the top 50 this year. It's going to be fun to see what happens. But I want to dedicate a big portion of this video to Nick Kyrgios, and Andy Roddick on his podcast responded to Nick Kyrgios, and that video blew up. It got over 100,000 views, and very rare in the tennis niche, that video got over 1,000 comments, and everybody is talking about this. And now that Nick Kyrgios lost to Fearnley, I did not think he was going to lose to him. I had Nick Kyrgios going into the third round. A lot of you guys correctly predicted that Nick Kyrgios was going to lose in the first round. But to be fair to Nick, there was an abdominal problem. Nick wasn't serving at his normal level in this match and ended up losing in 3 sets. Now, Nick Kyrgios dominated tennis news for the last month or so with his continuous disrespect towards former great champions and his continuous nagging of Jannik Sinner on social media. And I've talked about this in a previous video, and I agree with Andy Roddick 100%. This is not okay. I think what Kyrgios is doing to all of us, he's triggering us. I think he knows exactly what he's doing. I was triggered by Nick last year when he disrespected Becker, and he was talking about how the guys in the 90s didn't serve as well as the players today, and he called Boris Becker a potato, and he's continued to insult Boris Becker for some reason. And I get triggered by that because I have so much respect for the legends of the game. One thing that Nick said a while back that I've never forgotten is the following. Nick Kyrgios said that he cannot wait until the Australian Open is over. He can't stand the pressure. And in my opinion, the biggest problem for Nick Kyrgios is the expectations. And even Andy Roddick in his response video said that Nick Kyrgios' racket skills are on par with the big three. Therein lies the problem for Nick, because ever since he came through juniors and entered the Pro Tour and beat Federer very early in his career in Madrid, he beat Nadal in Wimbledon very early in his career, he got this label as someone who can challenge the big three, as someone who is capable of achieving those type of results. And there was an unbelievable amount of pressure on Nick, and I think this is why he hates playing in Australia, because there the pressure is immense, far greater than at any other tournament in the world, because in Australia he's playing at home. So usually in the game of tennis, players don't have the need to brag about their skills. They just collect titles and big wins, and people know how good they are. So it's completely unnecessary for a player to boast about their results. So in Nick Kyrgios' case, he boasts about his skills to tell people how good he is because he doesn't have enough results to back up his claims. Also, if you look at some of the Nick Kyrgios matches in the past, you'll see that he often doesn't try. And I've talked about this in some of my previous videos. Players will often tank a match to protect their ego. They're basically saying to the world, I lost because I didn't try. If I would have tried, I wouldn't have lost. Nick Kyrgios also often would not play tournaments for a long stretch of time and not compete at all. Now, of course, there were some injuries involved, and I'm not saying that Nick wasn't injured, but also Nick would skip a lot of tournaments, and I would put that in a category of not trying as well. And my conclusion based on this information is that Nick simply couldn't live up to the expectations because he keeps hearing that he's at the level of the big three, that he should be a Grand Slam champion. And he's just unable to deal with the pressure. So I was just scrolling on X and I saw Nick Kyrgios say in the press conference that this might be his last Australian Open. And there was a whole another portion of my other recording session where I said that there's still enough time. He's still young, he needs to get himself in shape and so on. And I just read that this might be it for Nick Kyrgios. And I gotta be honest with you, I'm overcome with sadness. Of course, I was triggered, as I said previously, from some of his comments. They're not cool. But Nick Kyrgios as a tennis player is kind of a sad story because there was so much more that he could have done with his career. I remember vividly when he was doing commentary last year, whether he was in a booth with Jan McEnroe or other former greats, they all kept telling him, Nick, we like seeing you here in the booth, but we much rather would see you on the court competing. And even Andy Roddick in his video said something very similar. So if this is it for Nick, it's kind of a sad story because I really thought that Nick was going to put it together and that he was going to maximize his potential, because at the end of the day, no matter how far you make it in the game of tennis as a professional player, when you hang it up, you want to have the feeling of having given it your best shot. If there's a feeling that you could have done better if you have tried harder, and that's something that's tough to deal with. I'm going to again bring up the story of Uncle Tony and Rafael Nadal. Uncle Tony's biggest worry for Rafa was that Rafa was going to have regrets when he retires from the game of tennis. And Uncle Tony shared a story of a former great champion who had regrets. This player felt that he could have done a lot better if he had tried harder. And he was very unhappy because of that. And Rafa assured Uncle Tony that that wasn't going to happen to him. And in the case of Nick Kyrgios, I'm certain that he could have done more, that he could have tried harder, that he could have played more. When you compare Kyrgios to players like Del Potro, Cilic, Berdych, Ferrer, they've all achieved far better results. Were they that much more talented than Kyrgios? Not necessarily. So if this is it for Nick, it's going to be tough to put it together in 2025. He can still do it. I think he needs to get himself in good shape and play a full schedule, and maybe by the time the grass season comes around, he can produce some good results. But again, if 2025 is Nick's last year, it's quite honestly kind of a sad story.